Good morning. Please ignore if you see one for out story time for out on March 11th for 21 seconds. Just forget that. That was a mistake. But anyway, we are here to record the story time for March 12th, Tuesday, March 12th. So thank you for joining me. Um, I hope to be with you each Tuesday. A spirit will choose a book for us and then choose the chapter or the passage as well. Maybe a paragraph, maybe an entire chapter. So I invite you to sit around like we used to at the library or elementary school and listen to see what spirit has to say to us. Know that please know that I do not read the passages ahead of time, and so any mistakes and or mispronunciations are my own and may happen. Be aware also that the dogs may interrupt if they have something to say as well. I also want to let you know that I have been having some eye difficulty, so I'm going to try to read them for you today. Donations are gratefully accepted. They can be made through PayPal or Venmo. So thank you for your generosity and settle back as we begin this week's choice. This week, Spirit has chosen the book The Message of the Sphinx by Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval. Oop, there it is. Okay, so in the passage that had me wanting to start with is the beginning of chapter 13. It's called Following the Stars. And wow, that is very small writing, so I'm going to give it my best. The disposition of the stars, as well as their movement, have always been the subject of careful observation among the Egyptians. They have been preserved to this day, records concerning each of these stars over an incredible number of years, this study having been zealously preserved among them from ancient times. It should be clear by now that the ancient Egyptians had very distinct ideas about the length and scope of their history, and that they set the first time, the Genesis event for their civilization, far back in what the Edfu building texts called the early primeval age. Just how long ago that event actually took place is not an issue that will be easily resolved because the surviving texts, the king lists, the very few fragments of Manetho's history that have been preserved, and certainly travelers' tales, are mostly incomplete and at times mutually contradictory. Moreover, we are obliged to cut our own way through a luxuriant jungle of diverse terminologies. Sages, ancestors, spirits of the dead, the followers of Horus, etc., 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 which further complicate the problem of trying to arrive at a coherent picture. Nevertheless, let us see what we can glean from these ancient sources, and let us try to put the jigsaw puzzle together. The Shining Ones. Amongst the very few king lists that have survived to the present day, the so-called Turin Papyrus reaches particularly deeply into the dark abyss of the past. Regrettably, more than half of the contents of this fragile document from the second millennium BC have been lost because of the gross incompetence with which it was handled by scholars when it was first transferred in a biscuit tin from the collection of the King of Sardinia to its present home in the Museum of Turin. The remaining fragments, however, offer occasional tantalizing glimpses of an astonishing chronologically. No, chronology. Chronology. Sorry. Let me try that sentence again. The remaining fragments, however, are offer us occasional tantalizing glimpses of an astonishing chronology. Of the greatest important amongst one of the greatest importance amongst these fragments is a badly damaged vertical register in which the names and the reigns of 10 Natira or gods were originally given, excuse me. Although in most cases the durations of these reigns are now illegible or completely broken away, it is possible to read the figure of 3,126 years ascribed to the rule of the wisdom god Thoth, and the figure of 300 years ascribed to Horus, the last fully divine king of Egypt. Immediately afterwards comes a second vertical register devoted to the followers of Horus. The most prominent of that general class of beings, variously called ancestors or sages or ghosts or spirits, whom the Egyptians remembered as having bridged the gap between the time of the gods and the time of Menes, the supposed first, hang on, the supposed first king, of the first historical dynasty. Again, much of the register is missing, but in its last two lines, which seem to represent a summing up age of particular interest, the Aku reigns before 23,200 years. The plural word Aku is normally translated as venerables. Yet we hinted at the end of the last chapter, a close examination of the full range of meanings that the ancient Egyptians attached to it suggests that another and far more intriguing possibility exists, one that is concealed by so generalized an epithet. To be specific, the hieroglyphs for that can also mean transfigured beings, shining ones, or shining beings, or astral spirits, understandably identified by some linguists with the stars. And there are other shades of meaning, too, that cry out to be taken into account. For example, in Sir E. A. Wallace Budge's authoritative hieroglyphic dictionary, the following additional definitions are provided to be bright, to be excellent, to be wise, and instructed. And Budge further informs us that the word was frequently associated with those who recite formulas or formulae. Such data, as we suggest, calls for a rethink of the title venerables as applied to the followers of Horus in the Turin Papyrus. Rather than merely being venerable, it is not possible that what was meant to be conveyed by the word Aku in this context was a picture of vastly enlightened and learned people, apparently with some connection to our interest in the stars. In short, an elite of highly initiated astronomer philosophers. Sorry about this reading. In support of this notion, is the fact that the followers of Horus were frequently linked as the ancient texts to another equally enlightened and shining class of ancestral beings called the souls of Pe. The souls of Nekhen. Now, Pe and Nekhen were actually geographical locations in Egypt, the former in the north and the latter in the south. Interestingly enough, however, as Professor Henry Frankfurt has confirmed, the souls of both of these places were also frequently grouped collectively under yet another title, the souls of Heliopolis, who were said to assist the king's ascent to heaven, a function commonly performed by the souls of Nekhen and Pi. A relief depicting this function shows the souls of Pi and Nekhen in the act, while the text calls them souls of Heliopolis. In general, accepted that the term soul, as used by the ancient Egyptians, had stellar attributes connected into the notion of eternal life in the duat to all the historical pharaohs aspired. Moreover, as Frankfurt rightly points out, the pyramid texts do indeed define the dominion role of the souls of Pe and Nekhen, and thus the souls of Heliopolis, as being to ensure that when a pharaoh died, he would be equipped to ascend to the sky and find his way into the cosmic kingdom of Osiris. This in turn coincides with what we know of the sages of Edfu and the followers of Horus, both of whom, as we have seen, may be identified with a single and original Heliopolitarian brotherhood of temple makers, whose function was to prepare and initiate the generations of the Horus kings in order to bring about the resurrection of what was remembered as the former world of gods. Now, that is what Spirit has picked out for us today from the message of the Sphinx. And I think I had a dog here trying to say hello. And oh, here she comes. There she is. This is Shailene. Wants to say hello. But anyway, I believe what part of this was for me was to know that I need to actually study this book if there's a class to study it, because I'm sure that I was not really understanding what was being read. So I hope that you understood some of that, and I hope that Spirit gives me an opportunity to learn more about it, as it seems extremely interesting. But I need to, I need to study it a bit more for it to make some sense. So that's it for this week. Again, we'll see you next Tuesday, which would be the 19th. And hopefully we'll see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye. Say goodbye.